a smile on your face when you're moving from place to place. Good morning.
Good morning, viewers, and welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, coming to you here live from the Port Mall in Scarborough, Tobago. We're in December. It's that kind of Christmas celebration time. Season's greetings to all. But at this point, we're heading on into our first interview this morning, and we have joining us online Denise Pitcher, Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, and we're speaking human rights issues on the rise. Good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, good morning to you and welcome. Just let's try to unmute again.
Just now, I'm not sure where to
Ah,
Are you hearing me?
all right, great. We're hearing you now. Good morning to you, and how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
All right, so we want to start on the premise. Let's speak first as it relates to giving us a brief understanding of the organization of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights.
Sure. So the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, it was founded in 2006 by Adanna Wyatt and Desmond Allen. It was founded around campaigning for the abolition of the death penalty. It has since evolved to work on advocating for the rights of persons in prisons, criminal justice reform, the rights of refugees and migrants, and advocating, for the rights of persons who may have suffered police brutality. We also, monitor the situation in Trinidad and Tobago, and then we issue condemnations if we observe any human rights violations. We also engage with international organizations. We submit reports to international organizations. And we engage in information and awareness campaign. And soon we will become, well, we are already, UNHCR, their legal services partner to provide legal services to refugees and migrants. So that's a brief, synopsis of what CCHR does.
Recognizing this, and I'm certain with the rise of social media, the human rights are now on a platform, because you're saying the organization was established since 2006, and now because of social media you're seeing active engagement with human rights being sort of restricted in some areas. So we want to talk a little bit about what your strategy is in terms of ensuring whatever category people they find themselves in, whether, as you mentioned, in the prisons, in schools, wherever they are. How do you intervene to ensure that their human rights are maintained? Even as a prisoner, of course, you do have human rights. In the hospital as a patient, you have your rights. Wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, you have rights as a human to live in the way that you choose to live, of course, in accordance to the law. So what is your strategy in terms of protecting these rights when people find themselves in unfortunate situations?
So information is one really important way, because what we've observed is people don't, the average person, they still don't understand their basic fundamental rights. People don't understand that access to housing, adequate housing is a human right. Access to health is a human right. They also don't understand that in terms of the justice system, it's very difficult for people to navigate the justice system, and because of the delays and the inefficiencies in the justice system, people can become frustrated. So information is one way, that we try to assist in protecting their rights. We do support on a limited basis, in terms of supporting with legal services, because when someone's rights are violated, usually one of the main ways to get some sort of recourse is through litigation, or with the assistance of an attorney. But of course that it depends on the resources. So education, definitely one way. Then we also submit reports. Like, for example, we recently submitted a report to the UN Human Rights Committee with respect to prisons condition, and that the Human Rights Committee is responsible for the implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And that particular covenant, it oversees the implementation, or the Human Rights Committee, oversees the implementation of the principles in that covenant. And the principles in that covenant, cover a number of different rights. It's civil and political rights. So like access to justice, due process, right to a fair trial, the death penalty. Those are some of the rights that are covered under that covenant. So basically what we did was we submitted a report highlighting a number of the human rights abuses relating to that covenant. The Human Rights Committee now reviews reports, not just by CCHR, other organizations submitted reports as well too. And then they issue recommendations to the government. And this is important because the Human Rights Committee now, you have that I guess that pressure on the government, that they also reminded of their human rights obligations, because once a country signs up to these covenants, they are obligated, they're committed to these principles, and they need to take measures in terms of legislation, in terms of setting up systems to ensure that people enjoy the rights outlined in these specific covenants or documents.
The direction you're looking at in terms of providing that explanation, because it takes me straight to my next question. We speak human rights, and I feel as though some persons do not have a clear understanding of what it is directly. I'd like you to elaborate as it relates to human rights violations, and when do I define, or when do I get to that point that I can say, all right, clearly you are violating my human rights? And you can use probably examples, of course, related to the Caribbean context as to what may be some of the more popular ones, just to bring persons into that state of consciousness.
Sure. I mean, of course, our human rights violations, I mean, the overarching body or the governing body, or the governing principles are outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the UDHR, or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it gave birth to all these different conventions and treaties. And then now, then states, they then, implement laws or establish laws in relation to these different covenants. So, for example, one of the human rights violations would be, as it's one that we see often, police use of force. We see, police officers using excessive force at some times. We see extrajudicial killings. We remember the most recent case in the prison as well too, where this young man died under suspicious circumstances. That's now currently under investigation. But I mean, in prisons, no one should fear in remand. No one should fear losing their life. Remand is not a place of punishment. So that's I guess that's one instance that we see very often: police use of force. Of course, with the rights of refugees and migrants, we often observe asylum seekers being detained and deported without having an opportunity to have their asylum claim assessed. So that's another human rights violation. So, you often see in the news as well too. Of course, we also have, high rates of gender-based violence, high rates of child abuse, high rates of domestic violence. So these are all human rights violations that continue to persist in Trinidad and Tobago.
Right. And how do persons access services through your organization to support them when they find themselves in these types of situations? And also, what are the figures looking like in terms of a ratio, perhaps, of persons who have accessed services in the past and the outcomes?
So right now, so that's the thing. So, I mean, CCHR, ultimately our goal is to be able to assist with the legal services, but of course that is contingent on resources, and resources are limited for small NGOs, like having that access to resources to provide legal services, because really and truly, a lot of the times when people experience these human rights violations, they need support with legal services. So we do have a team of attorneys, and we try to assist, even if it's with information. We just submitted a funding proposal for more resources, and if we were to get that would definitely support us in terms of providing legal services. But really and truly, we rely a lot on pro bono attorneys to assist with these matters. Unfortunately, that's the environment that we exist in. It's unless people want to commit their services to us free of charge, that's really the only way we can engage on a number of these matters. And we have in the past. We also have a strategic litigation team, but that's mainly to deal with refugee and asylum seekers, and any matters that arise out of them trying to access asylum in Trinidad and Tobago, and if they face any human rights violations. But yes, it really just comes down to having resources. We do, however, in terms of submitting your reports to these international organizations, they are useful. And also, we issue condemnations in the news, and we keep people informed. And information is that's a form of influence as well too. That's a form, people being empowered with information, they can be better able, to challenge any situation where they might face a human rights violation. But really and truly, there needs to be more support with regards to legal services, and I'm open to admit that.
What's your take as it relates to legislation in this regard? Because again, we look at human rights, an issue has occurred. People are facing extreme challenges. The organization speaks out, makes representation, it gets into the media, and still, the one who is being directly affected in some instances, may continue to face some challenges. What's your perspective as it relates to legislation in Trinidad and Tobago?
So yes, that's an area that we're also going to continue to engage on. We continue to lobby for better legislation. I mean, we've mainly been, lobbying in terms of asylum, the rights of migrants and refugees, because we don't have a refugee policy in Trinidad and Tobago. And because of the lack of a legal framework, we continue to put, legitimate asylum seekers at risk. Also, I mean, with regards to for the issue of human trafficking, we have good legislation. It's a good piece of law, but you can have as many laws as possible. You can have good law, but if you do not have a structure in place for the implementation of the law itself, is of limited use. And so, for example, with the issue of human trafficking, we've only now recently had our first conviction. And this is the issue of human trafficking is a very, very, it's a tremendous issue for Trinidad and Tobago. We have thousands, not hundreds, thousands of victims of human trafficking passing through Trinidad and Tobago. And the fact that we've only had one conviction, and we only have, not that we have prosecutions ongoing, but it's still, in relation to the magnitude of the problem, it's a disproportionate number of prosecutions. So yes, legislation is great, but if you do not have the system and the enabling environment to litigate, as I said, the law is limited.
All right. Thank you so much for bringing that level of insights to us and our viewers as it relates to human rights issues in Trinidad and Tobago, and your position as it stands, your challenges, as well as your plans and your strategies to ensure that you provide that level of support and that call for help from the communities that can help in this regard. We thank you so much for joining us this morning, and of course for sharing with us. And for those of you out there who are trying to get information on this, I mean, the Caribbean Center for Human Rights is a place where how can people contact you if they wanted to get some more information or support?
Sure. I mean, they can contact us via email at Caribbean Center for Human Rights @gmail.com. You spell center CENTRE. We also have a Facebook page and an Instagram. They can find us on Instagram. And we're usually really responsive, and we're happy to share any information.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with Denise Pitcher. She's the Executive Director of Caribbean Center for Human Rights, bringing some information there for us. And we're going to continue our conversation in studio with our guest this morning. And of course, coming up next, as I mentioned earlier, we're speaking with Wode Meyer, freelance African vlogger. He is in studio, yes. He is up next, so you want to stay tuned for that conversation as we speak with him. He landed in Tobago, and he tasted some of our water, so we're going to have that conversation with him this morning. He's up next.
Touchdown. No place, better place to be than Tobago.
That's right. So we're going to have that conversation soon. So stay tuned with us, ladies and gentlemen, as we go to a short break. And of course, tell your neighbor, tell your friend that this is your opportunity to share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be back.